Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next Hewlett-Packard's Lab podcast from Research to Reality. Today, for the first time, we'll be talking about the sales. It's my great honor and pleasure to host Jordan Nanos. Hi, Jordan.
Hi.
Who is the Principal Machine Learning Architect from HP Global Sales Technology Office. Welcome, Jordan.
Great to be here.
Can you please introduce yourself and your career?
Yeah. So my name is Jordan Nanos. I work as a machine learning architect at HPE, which means that I get to spend all of my time working with customers, basically, on their AI-powered applications when they're using HPE technology. So I'm part of the global sales organization. It means I get to work with customers all around the world. And I guess by way of personal background, I'm Canadian. I started with a company where I grew up near Toronto in Canada at our Mississauga office. And I currently live in Western Canada, a town called Squamish. So I get to work, again, with customers all around the world and focus on machine learning.
So you are the first salesperson on our podcast, and our podcast is named From Research to Reality. We have a lot of people from research.
Yeah.
You are as far as you can go on reality where you sell. So what does it mean? What do you do? Can you explain your role?
Yeah, so I work in the pre-sales organization at HPE, which means technical sales. There are salespeople at the company who exclusively focus on customers. They have quota, they make commissions, they are selling. I'm one layer back from them as a sales engineer or solution architect or just pre-sales, which means that I focus on helping the customers understand our technology and then work with them to design an architecture that includes our technology and then eventually implement it.
So you have a lot of experience here working at HP. And how has the sales and pre-sales evolved over the years?
Yeah, so when I first started, sales was in a bit of a transition. There were a lot more salespeople. Now we have less salespeople total, so that's been a big change. In addition, we have shifted focus. I think at the time when I started, a lot of people were selling based on relationships or history, and now the demands from our customers is for people to be much more technical, to understand their business in a lot more detailed way. And in the last roughly 2 years, we've seen that influence affect our sales organization, where our sales teams are now very focused on industries. So getting to know their specific customers in an industry.
Verticals, in
Exactly.
other words.
Yeah.
So I've seen you in action. You can't get more technical than you. And even your title says that you are very technical. But what type of customers do you work with? You don't necessarily have to go into details who these are, but what type of verticals, what type of customer, small, big, large, enterprise?
Yeah, I think, so in an interesting way, just because, I work as part of the global sales organization doesn't mean we only focus on big customers. We certainly focus on customers who are doing interesting or novel or unique things with our technology. And specifically, the focus that I have on AI means that we're working with people who are innovating with machine learning using our technology. I think the biggest focus for industry verticals would be regulated industries. So I do a lot of work with financial services, with healthcare, and with federal government agencies. These sorts of customers will have much more strict regulatory requirements or compliance requirements, and a lot of intellectual property sort of policies within their organization that mean that they need a partner like us who's willing to, work with them wherever their applications and data are.
So that's working with customers, but you don't only work with customers. You have the other side. So you have product managers, developers, researchers. How does that look like? How do you work with them?
Yeah, so I would say I spend about half my time with customers and half my time with HPE employees, others, teammates. The biggest thing that customers are looking to understand from me is what's new in our technology. And the biggest thing that our team members are looking to understand is what customers want. So making that connection is very fun for me and a big part of my job. I mean, what does this look like day to day? A lot of conversations, a lot of phone calls, a lot of presentations, but recently a lot of building of demonstrations. The trends with generative AI mean that everything is happening really fast, and the faster that we can understand how customers are using our technology, the better we can build new things for them, especially when it comes to software features.
Can you give some example? You already told me before. I mean, I saw you, as I said, in action.
Yeah.
You even done some demos for customers.
Yeah, so I mean, last year there was a huge focus from customers on just buying GPU servers to train language models. It seems that like currently, for the last few months, everybody's been shifting focus from training to inference, which means from doing research and experimentation to trying to get business value from the models that they've created. In our case, we have technology that's used for machine learning development and data management, but we're currently developing technology for inference. And one example is our machine learning inference software, which is in beta, working with customers who have inference requirements for large language models, understanding exactly how they're going to use our software tool. I mean, that's been a big thing that I've been working on recently.
Do you have any message for the technical people, given that you are helping customers and communicating back and forth?
Yeah, the biggest thing for HPE people who are technical, I think, is just using our technology. Like I said, things are moving so fast that there's a lot of people who have been caught up in like the rush and haven't taken the time to step back and use our technology, frankly. Log into a server, write some code, run it. It's becoming easier and easier to actually do that. And I just encourage people to get hands-on and start using our technology again.
There's an old saying, use it or lose it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you measure success in your work? I can understand the pure sales. It's based on how much money they bring.
Yeah.
But do you get some indirect accounting for that, or how does it work in your case?
Yeah, sales is pretty clear. You have one key metric, revenue. In my case, I think there's a lot of indicators that there's revenue coming, which means things like how many people have agreed to trial the product, or how many people have agreed to view a demo, or given feedback that you need to add certain features or something like that. Those sorts of indicators that, we hosted an event, 10, 20 people attended, 100 watched online, whatever that is, whatever that number is. What's the ratio or the amount of people that are looking for a second meeting, who want to learn more, or want to do a trial, or want to purchase a small amount with a larger amount coming later. All of those things are indicators that we're doing something right, that people are interested, they're seeing value in the work that you're doing, that sort of thing.
Technology in basketball, it's also small little things that players do in order to win the games.
Yeah.
So we spoke about the past, and you told us where we are now. Can you turn to the future? Where is sales and pre-sales going?
Yeah, I would say more of the same in terms of the emphasis on people getting more technical and having more industry vertical expertise. So, I mean, in ways, there's a trend that's just going to kind of continue over time. I think the biggest thing that I would say the future of sales looks like is being able to work and think globally. Many of our customers that I work with in other geographies, like in Europe, in Asia, are dealing with the exact same things that people in the US are doing. And being able to take those learnings and share them is really interesting. The other thing is across industries. So prior to the big language model craze right now, I did a lot of work on computer vision. And it was always interesting to see how similar a vision project for quality assurance in manufacturing was similar to image analysis in a medical device, which is similar to how people are analyzing video in a retail store. Transferring skills across industries, I think, is also going to be more important over time with language models. Like, everybody has data that they want to chat with. Everybody writes code. These sorts of experiences with generative AI, I think, are going to be across industries, across geographies, and we need to be able to contend with that over time.
So you mentioned a number of great best practices, adoption, using information from other areas, et cetera, across geography. But how would you innovate something that no one has done before? I know how to innovate in computer science, but how do you innovate in sales?
Yeah, so I think it's always just about going above and beyond for your customer, focusing on them and the things that they're looking to do, but also thinking about what they're going to be asking you for next. So I'll give an example. We had a customer, a large retail company, who was interested in, basically getting their first GPU server cluster started. And the size of the cluster they were looking to purchase was measured in like millions of dollars and hundreds of GPUs. But they wanted to get started small and get used to the technology. So something I would consider innovative. We shipped 3 servers to a partner's location, a guy named Jeff Gray at ACP. He installed them in his data center. I called him from an airport on my phone, walked him through the install for our software. He loaded on those servers, drove them in his truck to the customer's data center, got on the floor because he'd been there before, he knew the customer, plugged it in, and when the customer logged in for the first time, they said, "Oh, this is great. I already have this software loaded up," right? And it just made everything a lot easier to get started instead of waiting weeks for somebody to organize us to come and help them do an installation, things like that. So where's the innovation there? Jeff putting servers in his truck, me calling from an airport and trying to do an install over my phone. Focus on the customers and trying to go above and beyond for them is just the biggest thing that I think you can do in sales.
That's an amazing example. I'm really proud that we have people like you in our company. Is this example that you are most proud of? Did you have any other examples?
Yeah, so that one maybe is more innovation around process. I'm happy to share more examples. So one thing that we did recently was build a retrieval augmented generation application. And it was super interesting to see how something that I originally developed for a customer, which meant chatting with PDFs. They had all sorts of documentation about their products that they wanted to quickly learn about. Imagine you hire somebody new, and instead of giving them hundreds of pages to read through to understand your product details, they can kind of ask questions and get a response almost from the PDF. We took this and applied this to a couple of things that HPE does. Our quick specs, so details about our servers. I can now chat with documentation about our servers. I can also use this for, I showed a friend who works internally. Sometimes we get very long emails and there's 20, 30 back and forth things that are going in the chain. And you want to know, is there anything for me to do? I showed some of the guys on the performance engineering team here how to upload an email and quickly see, hey, my name's Jordan, is there anything for me to do in this thread? So we're pretty proud of that and also just excited to build on it in the future. And it's nice to see like the focus on a customer use case suddenly get applied to us internally, how we do our job day to day.
That's extremely exciting. Sometimes I have problem reading PDF, let alone chatting with it. So you can skip this question if you prefer. I know that you happen to report to Scott Twist, who is one of the most dynamic person I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So how is it to work with him? I mean, you are dynamic, he is dynamic. Are you in synergy or you just explode in all this dynamism?
I think mostly in synergy. It's been great working for Scott. So Scott's really interesting because he's definitely a player coach. Like he leads from the front and he does the same job as me in many ways, better than me in many ways. And that's really exciting to just learn from, kind of just by watching how he operates. In my career at HPE, prior to working for Scott, I always had managers who had either never done the job that I do or were, it had been a long time since they did the job. So when I had questions, I would go to teammates or others, and in many times I go to Scott. The dynamism, yeah, I can't keep up with that guy. I don't know when he sleeps. So, it's been great though. Yeah.
Yeah, it is great to have not just manager but mentor, who
Exactly,
can
yeah.
do the things.
Yeah.
You are in sales, so you are selling. It appears to me that something open, like open source, is completely opposite from sales.
Yeah.
How does sales see open source? I understand the business model and all of that, but what's your gut reaction?
So the best saying that I know about open source is that open source is free if you have the time. And I think that's great because a lot of our technology is open source here. And the more people that spend time learning about our open source technology, the more feedback that we get, the better our technology gets. And in many cases, open source technology is used for closed source products. So a bigger community in the open source area really influences how the closed source product is developed. For me, the number one thing is just support. Like, not everybody has the time to learn how to use open source and to be effective with it. And that's where professional services, which HPE has a large business doing, that's where it fits in. Like, you're selling people who understand the open source technology and their time and their expertise.
I like your definition of open source. But let's move now to the other end of spectrum, standards. Earlier you mentioned compliance, regulations. Do standards help with it, or they make your life harder, or how do you relate to standards?
Yeah, standards are interesting. So I think that there's different ways to view this. An easy way to differentiate, I think there's a big difference between hardware standards and software standards in a way. You think about things like PCIe or OCP. That's a clear hardware standard that has benefited like component manufacturers, people who build GPUs or accelerators, for example, storage drives, network cards. Having an OCP standard is quite interesting and influences our technology, things like that. Software standards on the other side or the other way, I think it can, in many cases, they'll get criticized for hindering things and being just slow. And I think honestly, there's some truth to that. But I come at this from the perspective of focusing on AI, where things move incredibly quickly and publications are happening overnight on archive. Here's this new model, go try it out. That's very different than how, a telecommunications network standard gets developed or something like that, right?
What did you find most gratifying in your career?
So I like to say that I get to do three things in my role. I get to learn, I get to teach, and I get to win. I get to compete. I'm not sure which of those three I prefer the most, but I can tell you that I grew up playing a lot of sports. I like competing, and working in sales or in a sales organization means that every day you're competing and there's a chance to win.
So you like winning.
Exactly, yeah.
Which sports did you do, by the way?
I grew up playing a lot of hockey and lacrosse.
Okay. Why ask? Coming from Canada. Yeah. But if you would start all over again, would you do it the same way, or you do something differently?
That's interesting. I don't like to think about that too much, because you end up just feeling regretful if you analyze too much. But I do think there's perspective that I have now that would influence decisions I made when I was younger, like what to study in school, how much time to spend on academics versus on sports, where to work in the summer. I did, between my first and second year of school, I did some really hard landscaping, and I learned a lot, and that's beneficial, but I don't know how much I've really needed to learn from that stuff. So I don't know. No regrets. Keep moving forward. Yeah.
Good. At HP, we take pride that we do things for the broader good. How does sales do things for the broader good?
Yeah. Well, we sell to everybody, and there's a lot of our customers doing good things in the world. People use AI technology to discover new medicine and therapeutics. People use it to provide banking services to the unbanked all around the world. People use it to connect people, telecommunications. I was just working with a customer whose software provides like the early warning system for fires and floods and hurricanes and things like that. So, when you're helping a customer adopt your technology and use it and be effective with it, in many ways you're helping them pursue their mission. And I think that's the biggest thing. I get to jump between many different missions every day. Some, by different metrics could be considered more broadly good than others, but I think generally, like, we are very much in service of our customer's mission in a lot of ways. The other thing is that HPE just gives a lot of opportunities to give back. Mm-hmm. And I think being in sales, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you spend your time. I don't have I don't live near an HPE office, but when I'm here, there's always, events going on and opportunities to kind of contribute and give back. And that's a great thing for sure. Yeah.
Do you have any message for the early career path people other than maybe not doing gardening during the summer?
Yeah. It hurts your back later in life when you're skiing or mountain biking. Message for early folks in early career. So the biggest thing that helped me over time was kind of learning for myself from the industry rather than waiting for people to teach me things. And that's just the biggest advice I would give. There was no, when you're in sales especially, like, there's always a fire going on every day. Mm-hmm. Somebody needs something to get done. And finding time to learn something new never works. You need to make learning a priority and then find time to solve the problems of the day.
It's funny, I was going to ask you what do you do in spare time, but given what you just told me, do you even have spare time? Do you ever read a book, and can you recommend some?
I do have spare time. I do read books. So my favorite book, if you want to understand sales and marketing, is called Small Data by a guy named Martin Lindstrom. There's a big trend in the industry related to big data, and Martin focuses on small data points. He tells stories about spending over 300 days a year on the road, living in people's houses to get an insight like, hey, Lego blocks are getting too simple. Kids want them to be more complex. And suddenly Lego's business turns around. So lots more things in that book that are super interesting and a fun read. I love classic literature. So recently I've been reading, I'm currently reading the Count of Monte Cristo. I love Russian authors. I love Greek authors. So I think that's, just an example, like, read some old stuff too, not just the new things. And then one thing about AI, A Brief History of Intelligence by Max Bennett, fantastic book.
Mm-hmm. Is your interest in classic books related to your origin?
A little bit, yeah. My dad's Greek. His dad is very Greek. Being born in Greece, my dad born in Canada. And so, the great Greek philosophers and Aesop's fables and things like that are definitely influential. And growing up with Greek people, you in your life, you learn a little bit about ego and hubris because they invented everything, right? Democracy, mathematics, philosophy. So
podcasts.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the list goes on for sure.
Yeah. So I understand that you now live in Canada. You told us multiple times, but I heard you also lived in US before, mm-hmm. and I'm sure you visited your ancestors in Greece, perhaps. So how do you compare living in all these areas?
Yeah, I lived in Alpharetta near Atlanta for 9 months when I was a new hire, as part of the pre-sales new hire program. Great program that HPE has. So I've lived certainly in Canada for most of my life. The U.S. is very different. I think I'm most used to living near Canadian people, and so Yeah, both from living and from just traveling the world, meeting customers and having them show you around as opposed to having a tour guide gives you a lot of insight in how people live day to day. It's been fascinating. I don't know if I can pick out like obvious things to point out differences between Canada and the US. I mean, you can point out political differences or economic differences. You know, the biggest thing that I'm proud of from growing up in Toronto is that it's an incredibly multicultural place. You know, all of my friends in high school had some story about where their parents came from or their grandparents many of them spoke other languages, ate strange food that I got to try. And I just encourage people to do that because I find variety, that's the spice of life, right? That's great stuff.
Great things. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope everybody learned as much as I did during this short interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me.